But why, some say the moon? Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why 35 years ago fly the Atlantic? Why does Rice play Texas? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win.
Hello, friends. Another week is in the books. This is Life Hacks for a Modern World, and I am Matthew Harris, your friend who helps you to stand on the shoulders of giants so you can achieve your dreams. Here is today's weekly life hack. Today we're covering the benefits of delaying caffeine. The alarm clock rings and there's a lot to do. You wake up, start your morning routine, and down the hatch goes God's nectar, that magic jitter juice that will make everything and everyone tolerable. But come 1 p.m., with half the day left to go, you crash, and into the break room or into the kitchen you go for another cup. Lying awake at 10 p.m., you're mentally exhausted, but still wired from that 1 p.m. cup of coffee. And cue a fitful night of tossing and turning until you finally drift off to sleep. This used to be how I operated, and I know some of you have it even worse. But thanks to the groundbreaking research by Stanford neuroscientist Dr. Andrew Huberman and UCal Berkeley professor of neuroscience and psychology Dr. Matthew Walker, we have greater insight into how we sleep, why we sleep, and what role caffeine plays. One of their conclusions, and the most actionable takeaway that I've employed from their research, is to delay my morning cup of coffee for at least 1 hour after you wake up. Here's why. As I'm sure you know, the adult brain works on a circadian rhythm. We spend a certain amount of time asleep and a certain amount of time awake. Dr. Matthew Walker's research points to the fact that we sleep because wakefulness is actually slightly detrimental to our brains. Wakefulness causes microdamage to the cells and synapses in our brains, and it's only when our minds enter what's called default mode network and eventually sleep that damage is repaired. This is why older adults who have trouble sleeping can eventually develop degenerative brain disorders like dementia, as can be seen in the cases of people who famously did not sleep much per night, such as Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, who both had debilitating Alzheimer's in their later age. So that's why we sleep, but what about how we sleep? In general, and on the whole, throughout the day there's a chemical in our brain that builds up and creates what Dr. Walker calls sleep pressure. I'm sure we're all familiar with the sensation. This chemical is called adenosine, or adenosine. Adenosine is kind of the British way of pronouncing it as Dr. Walker pronounces it, and Dr. Huberman pronounces it as adenosine. So it's kind of like aluminium and aluminum. Doesn't really matter, but it's adenosine or adenosine. So adenosine bonds with neuroreceptors throughout the day, and as the day gets later, creates that sleep pressure that lets you know it's time to go to bed. When you wake up, the brain begins to flush itself of adenosine to achieve wakefulness. The issue is, if you have a cup of coffee before the brain can finish this flushing process, you're trapping some of that adenosine in the brain. Here's how it works. Caffeine is effective in providing a heightened state of wakefulness by bonding with those same receptors that adenosine does. So rather than give us energy, all caffeine is really doing is making it impossible for us to feel tired by blocking the very receptors that are needed for us to feel as such. The issue is when you reach for a cup of coffee right after waking up, you block yourself from feeling tired, but the brain hasn't had a chance to flush the adenosine. As a result, when the half-life of coffee wears off around mid-afternoon, that adenosine is still there and it bonds with the now vacant neuroreceptors. You crash, precipitating the need for another cup of coffee or your preferred mode of caffeine. So what can you do? Dr. Andrew Huberman provides a few actionable things you can do to maximize your circadian rhythms. Delay caffeine intake for at least 1 hour after waking up. He says anywhere from 1 hour to 90 minutes. Get natural sunlight in your eyes during that hour. If you can't, bright artificial light will do. Exercise during that 1 hour can be helpful, but is not essential. Don't drink coffee after 11 a.m. because the half-life of coffee is about 6 hours and the quarter life is around 12. That means that after 6 hours, half the effective dose of caffeine will still be in your system, and after 12, a quarter will still be in your system. Get natural twilight sunlight in your eyes in the evening. This will signal to your brain that it is evening and promote natural production of adenosine. Limit blue light an hour before bed, which stimulates our wakefulness faculties. Blue light is emitted by most traditional LEDs. Why and how we sleep is a fascinating and complicated topic, and I barely scratched the surface here in this little blog post. I encourage everyone and anyone to check out both Dr. Andrew Huberman and Dr. Matthew Walker's research on the subject, especially Dr. Walker's book, Why We Sleep, which was groundbreaking for me and groundbreaking for the entire scientific community. Check out some additional resources that I'll link in the show notes. And thanks as always to listening for Life Hacks to a Modern World. Feel free to subscribe here if you don't already, and subscribe to my Substack in the link in my bio. Thanks as always. See you next week. Bye.